I mean, it's a simple one, but it's just start. Because I think with any creative endeavor, whether it's writing, editing, painting, it's just so hard to start, right? And when you're an editor and you're faced with 30, 40 shots for one scene, especially if it's a big scene, you get overwhelmed and you don't know where to start. Just put one shot down and you are on your way. Just don't overthink it.
Hey there, it's Ginny.
And I'm Monica.
And this is Hitting Her Mark,
a podcast for women in the arts, actors, filmmakers, artists who are passionately chasing their creative dreams,
while juggling the beautiful chaos of caring for those they love.
We're here to share stories, insights, and inspiration, proving that you can hit your mark without compromising what matters most.
So if you're ready to make your creative dreams a reality, let's dive in. Welcome back, everyone, to Hitting Her Mark. Today's guest is Sandy Pereira. Her work spans some of the most acclaimed films and series of the past decade. You've seen her craft in projects like Mean Dreams, Giant Little Ones, Cardinal, Until the Night, The Porter, Slip, and Excess County. Her recent works include TIFF premieres Young Werther, 40 Acres, and Alex Winter's latest feature, Adulthood. Sandy's storytelling instincts and editorial precision have earned her multiple CSA, DGC, and CCE wins and nominations, as well as a reputation as one of the most exciting editors working today. Thank you so much for joining us today, Sandy. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We have Sandy Pereira, an award-winning editor known for her work in critically acclaimed films and television series, which we will definitely dive into. We met each other on Adulthood, which was Alex Winter's latest feature and had its gala world premiere at TIFF 2025. Thank you so much for joining us here at Hitting Her Mark.
Thank you.
So we're going to dive right in. We always like to start from the beginning. Now, full disclosure, you are our first editor. So we're going to have lots of questions about the process. So many questions. Start from the beginning. When did you know that you wanted to be in this industry, this crazy industry we're in?
Yeah, it's always a funny circuitous route, right? To end up in like a role like editor. I don't think anybody as a kid, maybe nowadays, but back when I was a kid, nobody said, I want to be an editor. No, we didn't know what the hell an editor was. So definitely I started like a lot of kids in school and high school, acting in plays and just, loving the performing arts, loving to be part of the creative process. I loved creative writing. I wasn't the math student, I was more of that English art student who just wanted to sort of explore the creative side of life. And I ended up going to U of T and studying cinema studies with sort of this idea that I would, maybe direct, right? And then I sort of explored other areas. I worked at a film lab for a little while. I did this one course where we had to edit material we shot. And I was like, it just something clicked, it was like, oh, this is something that I can do. Like, this is something that I like to do. Like I liked creating something out of like putting together a puzzle and figuring out how to tell a story through images. And so I ended up pursuing that. I went back to school, kind of figured that all out. And then the road to get to be an editor was another. I mean, I've been in this industry since 2002. And I started out as a trainee. Then I moved up to a second assistant editor. And then I was a first assistant editor for quite a while, working with like huge editors and talents. I worked on 5 different Cronenberg films. As an assistant editor, I worked with Daniel Resende, who cut City of God a couple of times. I just was really lucky to work with huge talent. And so when I made the break to become an editor, it wasn't an easy road, but I had such an education at that point in how, not just how to cut, but how to be in an editing room, how to be with directors, how to be with producers, that I think I kind of learned that diplomacy. I'd learned how to talk the talk and how to, talk story, talk images, and I still fail at little things. Like, I'm still not the best person to talk about camera angles. Well, camera angles are okay, but like, I don't know anything about lenses and I just honestly bluff half the time. But like, so there's always little areas where you're just like, don't ask me about that lens. I don't know. But But you generally, you learn a lot from being in that environment and just by osmosis, but also just by trying, by working. And that's kind of how, so sorry, to make a very long story short, that's how I ended up editing.
Right? It's such a collaborative process.
Knowing that you worked as a post-production as a post PA, and then you worked,
Mhm.
as you said, pretty extensively as a first assistant picture editor. Can you talk about that transition into being the primary editor on a project? Was there like a specific moment or a project that defined that transition for you?
Yes. So when I was working on the Cronenberg films, I worked with an editor named Ron Sanders who had cut the majority of his films, but also was, especially in his heyday, like probably one of the top editors in the world. And he mentored me. So I think finding a mentor is really important. And so he mentored me. And so over the course of, I worked with him on and off for 10 years. And over the course of those 10 years, he would give me opportunities to cut, to talk about cuts, talk through his cuts, even, which, started building the confidence of like, I know what I'm doing. I know what I'm doing. I know what I'm doing. It's just this little sort of validations that, you know what you're talking about. And so as time wore on, he would include me more in the editing process. So we worked on a film. Well, it happened a couple of times. So on Maps to the Stars, which was the last film I worked with him on of Cronenberg's films, I was an additional editor. And then I worked on a film with him called The 33, which again, he got me cutting a ton. And so I ended up with an additional editing credit on that, which was a big feature film. And then the last film I did with him was a film called Mean Dreams, which was super low budget. I had worked with the producer and the director before as a first assistant editor on their first film. And so we had built a relationship building, very important, by the way,
Mm-hmm.
not just with your mentor, but with everybody in the business. And so they had a very low budget feature called Mean Dreams. And so Ron and I decided we would do it together. I would assist, but also co-edit. And so he gave me the opportunity to get this like head credit, essentially, not just additional editing. And so that was kind of our deal on that one because it was this low budget thing. He didn't need the credit. He wanted to help elevate me. And
Yes.
so that helped solidify that. And then the producer of that film, Mean Dreams, one of the producers, Alison Black, and I, we became very close. And she and I worked really well together. And she put me up for Giant Little Ones, which was the film that kind of helped push me into sort of leaving behind my assistant career and finally moving to
Right.
become a leader. So it wasn't, again, it wasn't a straight linear path, but it was all
Right. Well, it sounds like that mentorship was really critical and it gave you that confidence as well. And you're sort of finding your own voice and your own stamp in this arena. What was the most valuable lesson you learned from Ron? Was there one like major takeaway?
I mean, it's a simple one, but it's just start. Because I think with any creative endeavor, whether it's writing, editing, painting, it's just so hard to start, right? And when you're an editor and you're faced with, I don't know, how, sometimes like 30, 40 shots for one scene, especially if it's a big scene, you get overwhelmed and you don't know where to start. And his whole thing was just start, just put
Mm.
one shot down and you are on your way. Just don't overthink it. And I mean, there was lots of lessons, let me tell you, like over the years, just sitting with him and watching him work. But that's always the one when I'm sitting here and I'm overwhelmed and I'm just so unmotivated, like just
Mm.
start. And it's true. Once you just put, even if it's just, he's like, you just grab the master. Even if you know you're not going to start with the master, master shot, just start with the master and just go from there. It's always sort of the thing where I'm overwhelmed or I'm tired or I'm just, behind or anything where I'm just feeling like a little bit lost. It's like, okay, just start. Start with the
Mhm.
just start with the master and just go. And then 99% of the time I go back and change that shot out. But whether it's for a different performance or because I wanted to just start on like a close up or a two shot instead or a moving shot, it's just, you just start. And so that I think is one of the biggest pieces of advice that he's, and
Yeah,
it was
that's
just
great.
so, Yeah, and also just watching dailies and not being in a rush. Just watch them and think through what the scene is about, think through what the scene contributes rather than just start thing is when you're sort of feeling hopeless.
Yeah.
The other thing is like, don't rush the process. Start, just watch stuff, look at it. And then, yeah, if you're still feeling overwhelmed, then just cut something. And then you can always go back and change it, especially in the digital world.
Yeah.
So I have two questions. So Mean Dreams actually went to the Cannes Film Festival 19. Was that your first
Right.
major festival? And what was that experience like?
I did not go to Cannes.
You didn't
wish.
go.
At the time, I did not go. I think it was earlier than that. I think it was
Oh, 2016.
2016. Yeah, it was a little
Yes.
while ago. Yeah, that I would have loved to have gone, but they did not offer to take me. And I did not have the money at the time to go. And I think I was working and I couldn't get out of work. But yeah, so sadly I did not go. But it's still like I remember seeing photos and being so excited for them. I mean, I'm still very close with Nathan Orlando and Alison Black to this day and would work with them again. And I have worked with them again, but I would still work with them again in a heartbeat. But yeah, unfortunately, that was not my first festival experience. Yeah, I know.
Yes, I know. It's so anyway, but I mean, it's still great to be recognized, right?
Mm-hmm. It helped with if when you're trying to put your name out to like agents and stuff to say, hey, I had
Absolutely.
So yeah,
Absolutely.
even if
Yeah. When you were talking about watching the dailies and doing the cuts and sort of figuring out the story from an actor standpoint, I think we're always really curious. Like, what are you looking for? Are you looking at the acting? Is it mainly angles, or what do you look for?
pretty much everything. I hate to tell you too, we tear apart the acting. Not tear apart in a bad way, but I mean, we look at every nuance in your face,
Yes.
in
My
your
gosh.
body language. Not in a bad way. I don't mean tear apart like, oh my God. No, so much happens beyond the dialogue. We're not just looking, okay, yes, we
Yes.
tap our favorite performance in terms of how you deliver a line for sure. We have our favorites. And sometimes our favorites are not the director's favorites. And so we're always going through performance. But for me, one of the biggest things with performance is all those subtleties. The swallow when you're nervous, the, twitch of an eye, the
Behavior.
all of those little behaviors that are tells, right? So if you're being deceitful, sometimes we don't want to show the audience you're being deceitful, but sometimes there's just a little tell, just a little hint that might trigger a question. And maybe you won't notice it right away. Maybe it's builds throughout the scene or throughout the whatever episode of television or film, but it's these little things that I always find and I mark them as I go because those are the performance bits that I think flesh out a performance,
Mhm.
help a scene have subtext and depth, and also make your performance good. Like, if we're just on you for a line of dialogue, so you can deliver dialogue and deliver a line, but when you're not saying anything and when you're looking a certain way or looking a certain direction or, some actors are just like they don't need to say anything. It's just all in their eyes. Every actor has their own strengths, but some actors it's like, dude, like I can't look away. Those are the
Right.
moments you want to flag. And so, yes. So when I say tear apart, sorry, that was a bad choice of words. I meant like dissect. We dissect.
You dissect. Yeah.
And you magnify. You really
Magnify,
go
pull
into
out all those little beats. Like, and I always find those are the ones that just like, especially like they're good in drama, but in comedy, when you can find those little beats that just are little tells, they can just add so much to a scene that, if you're just going bam, 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 back to dialogue, it can be funny, but you add those little moments, those little tells, those little uncomfortable beats, then suddenly you're elevating that scene into something a little bit more. So that is,
Yeah.
but also we're looking at angles, we're looking at, We're looking at sort of the geography of the scene, the architecture of the
Right.
scene, making sure that we're telling a story, that when we pop out to a wide, that should mean something. It shouldn't just be randomly selecting shots. I mean, we're and sometimes it's hard to figure out, like, this is an intense conversation, like, should we stay in close? Should we stay in a 2 shot? Should we go out wide to just sort of give it some breath, or do we not want to give it breath? Like, there's always reasons for why we stay in coverage, but yeah, but we're dissecting everything. I mean, art directors put so much work into the language of the frame, and cinematographers put so much work into the language of the frame, that you just kind of find where it all kind of connects. And that's kind of our job.
I find it so fascinating because as an editor, you have so much creative control, in terms of crafting even the performance in some ways, because the way you cut it can change an entire performance of an actor. I am
Like the
curious.
context of it.
Mhm.
I'm curious, actors have these conversations when you're doing multiple takes, right? You're like, should I just be doing like slight differentiations so that when they cut it, it's still like a seamless cut for you do think about that sometime. Or is it better to do something drastically different? Let's change it up every time. Is there a preference for you as an editor when you get all these different takes? Like, do you like it when there's just sort of subtle differentiations and you can piece it together maybe more seamlessly? Or do you like the out of the box, like entirely different takes that kind of make it fun? I don't know. I'm curious.
Yeah. Well, honestly, I think that it's definitely a conversation between the actor and the director of what the
Yes,
character.
of course.
And I think sometimes the actor and the director are not at odds, but just maybe have some different ideas of what they want. And I think in that case, it's always, you get it sometimes and sometimes you don't. And it's only because I know schedules could be super tight, especially in television. It's like if you're lucky to get 2 takes, you know what I mean?
Right, exactly.
When features are a little bit more forgiving that way, but if sometimes directors will say, do one for you.
Right.
So then that's your opportunity to just say, okay, I'd love to just do one out of the box, just like crazy or fun, or, just not as subtle as, say, the director wanted. And I love that personally, because sometimes you want to build. And sometimes if an actor gives me some variation, but not within the same take, I can then build that. So sometimes we want to start a performance where, say, a scene where someone's getting more and more upset. If they give me one where they're ramped right up, then I can try to build to that if the scene requires it. So it does kind of help. And sometimes it's just like you get in the edit and you're like, we need this character to be more like this rather than like this, because sometimes the script just doesn't do enough, and you get into an edit and it's just like, it's maybe flat, or maybe what the director wanted isn't what this reading on screen. So if you give some variation, if you have the time and you can say to your director, can I do one for me? I think some directors might have a different idea, but if you have that trust to do something different, I think it's always great to have variety in the cutting.
Yeah.
Keeping in mind television and film require a certain level of continuity. But even then, I mean, if the performance is off the charts great, then I personally will try my best to make the continuity not matter. But yeah, I think anything you can do. I think a lot of directors, okay, sorry, I'm going on a tangent, but a lot of directors especially really don't like to cut too much. So they want to stay in a frame, or they want to stay in a shot as long as possible, unless it requires cuttiness, but they generally don't like to cut too much. So in order to have a performance that can hold a shot as long as they want, it has to be energetic. And it doesn't necessarily mean you have to be energetic, but your performance has to have energy behind it. And so when you give me a variety, I will pick the one that can sustain that shot the longest, as long as it's not totally out of the realm of what the director wants. But generally speaking, they're not. It's just that you might want it to be a little bit more sort of weighted in one way or another, right? That's usually what off, your take on something is. It's like you want to weight it more this way, and the director wants it weighted more that way. You know what I mean? Emotion.
Yeah, totally.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that's so helpful. Because
Yeah.
sometimes we're were like, I don't know, I feel like I have to do it exactly the same every time because then when they cut it together, I don't want to be something different. But then, yeah, you do work with people and they're like, oh, every take I like to do something different. And I'm like, but
Yeah.
how are they going to piece it together?
Yeah.
Yeah, I
But
mean,
yeah, this is
yeah. I mean, if every take is wildly different, that is difficult. Especially if
Right.
you're like your
Right.
close up is wildly different from your two shot or your wide shot. I mean, there
Right.
has to be
Right.
some continuum, but
Yes.
but if you, especially in your tighter shots, if you can deliver something where it's still within the scene, but it's maybe more emotionally weighted. Also, you can't ask
Mhm.
an actor to be emotionally heavy in every single take. It's wearing,
Right.
right?
Yes.
So it's usually the
Yes. Yeah.
first or the last.
Right.
And usually it's in your close up. I mean, we always know that the best performance is going to
Mhm.
be in your close up because generally speaking, actors are saving their energy for that because
Yes. Yeah.
they're in your face.
Yeah.
You don't
Exactly.
see that level of emotion in a wide shot as you do in a close up. But so yeah, so if you want to give variances or ask for a take, if you feel like you're in the position to ask, I know sometimes you're not, but then I say go for it because it can only, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Big
Mhm.
deal, right?
100%. Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah. Nothing lost.
nothing
Yeah.
lost, exactly, and
Nothing
possibly
lost.
something gained.
Gained. Yeah.
If
Exactly.
they have the time, yeah, and if they have the time, and like I said, you have the trust of the director. Sometimes you work with a director, you're on set for one day, and you barely know them, and we get that.
Mhm.
Like you just, especially day players, like you just don't have that time and that connection
Mhm.
to sort of set yourself apart. Like it's just really difficult. But if you have a chance and you're, say number 5 on the call sheet or number 10 on the call sheet, even like you can maybe be on set for a few days, you can ask
Yeah. I
if
love
you can
that.
do one. And I remember
Yeah.
actually on Adulthood, Ginny, like you had to like do some improvisation when Kaya leaves the room in that one scene, and you're just like, "Hello."
Right.
Like I remember Alex loving
Right.
that because it was like I don't know how much we ended up using of it, but it
Right.
was just fun because it was like, you're sitting there like, "What the fuck? She left. Like you're leaving me high and dry." And it wasn't scripted,
Right.
but it was a moment that we pulled out. I can't remember how much of it we kept again, but when you're trying to find a scene, you're finding these moments and you're just trying to build something kind of, in that moment, we wanted something kind of funny because she's like right before a scene that's like kind of intense. So, yeah.
Really
Right.
intense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, that's great. I love hearing that.
Yeah.
Sandy, you also touched on TV versus feature films. You've edited a number of incredible projects, feature films such as you mentioned, Giant Little Ones, Run This Town, and most recently Adulthood, which
Mhm.
Ginny was in. You've edited for TV series such as Coroner, Cardinal, The Porter. Some of those you've won awards for, Canadian Screen Awards, and most recently Revival, which I love.
Did you? Yeah, you saw it. Great.
I love it. Yes, my friend Gia Send who is in it, and I just love it. Can you talk about the differences in editing features versus television series, especially ones maybe like The Porter, where there's historical or cultural significance?
So, I mean, I think one of the biggest differences is a feature film is generally smaller oversight, especially independent cinema, smaller oversight. So it's more director driven, writer director driven, usually same person. And it tends to be a more intimate sort of experience. We don't have a ton of outside interference, don't have a ton of outside pressure. There's always pressure, but not the same as a TV series. So TV series, there's a lot of interests at play. So there's the writers, there's the directors, there's the producers, showrunners, then there's the execs, then there's the television studio, sometimes multiple television studios when you have, like with The Porter, it was BET Plus and CBC. We tend to weigh one more towards the other depending on how much funding was given, and who has sort of first rights. They tend to get priority of notes, but we always made sure that we were also addressing the others' notes. So it can get a little messier. It can get a little bit harder to understand what the outcome is supposed to be in terms of what kind of show they want Whereas, especially with an indie feature, it tends to be not one person's vision, but generally speaking, one person guiding that vision to the finish line, to the theater. So it can be more intense in a different kind of way. It's more intense in a more personal way. Whereas television is more intense in a pressure kind of way. Like there's just pressures from everywhere. So, and it's more structured in a way where it's like, there's a team of writers, there's a director who comes in, directs the episode, does post-production for a few days, leaves, is gone, just totally gone. And then you have showrunners and producers for the rest of it, and then networks. So it just becomes this, you start to talk about it in terms of what the show is going to be rather than what it is. Does that make sense? I don't know if that
Yeah.
makes sense to me, but not all TV. So something
Well,
like Bible is-
some of them are like little mini movies, right? So you're compiling, you have to see this big vision. It's not just
do.
one piece of it.
Exactly. So you're sort of cutting different
It's the long
episodes.
game.
It's the long game, but it's also, if it's say procedural, for example, there are parts that might carry over 10 episodes, but each episode has its own defined story. So then you sort of get into sort of like, okay, does this fit into the whole, make sure that the tone is similar throughout. Like we're not trying to upset the cart in the middle unless it's deliberate, but it's just
You're
different
thinking of the overall arc from episode
And
1
the
to
whole
Overall
episode.
season, right?
everything, but also like we need to keep bums in seats
Mhm.
from act 1 to act 2 and make sure people don't, like, because if you're watching from home, you can easily just change the channel. So there's a different kind of criteria. Like we need to catch, you need to have a great cold open. You need to have a first act with an out that it keeps people engaged. They'll come back. They'll wait through if it's on network television, they'll sit through a commercial. If it's streaming, they're not just going to be bored and change it for something, something else on their watch list or go back to Gilmore Girls for the 80th time. Like it's a different way of thinking. Like, whereas a feature film, especially one that's going to that will end up probably or hopefully in a festival environment, it's a different kind of audience. We're not as worried about those things. We're more worried about what it is rather than what it could be. So that's kind of what I mean by that. And also there's always this thing with especially network television that, now it's not guaranteed you'll get a second season, and so we really, there's a lot of talk about how to make it exciting so that we can sell it, so that we can get a second season. So there's all these discussions going on, which you wouldn't think editorial would be a part of, but we're always a part of because we're talking to everybody. So even though I have nothing to do with marketing and I have nothing to do with discussions with the network about a second season, it's always on my mind, like how to keep this show exciting and riveting and make people want these characters to succeed, even if they're not super likable or whatever it is that we need, because people want to come back and watch those characters in a year from now, so that's kind of what I mean. And then in terms of scheduling, feature films tend to have a little bit more time because you're focusing on one thing, whereas TV series is just ongoing. So, you have so much time for your first block, and then your second block is coming, and then your next block is coming. So you're always kind of bouncing around. You're always working. You don't have time to really sit and focus and work a performance, work a scene. It's a little bit of a different pace for us. So it can be just as rewarding. It can be just as challenging. It can be even more challenging because of that. But it definitely is
It's a different
way of
beast.
working. It's a different beast.
Yeah.
1,000%. And you have to switch your brain into a different mode. This isn't like go through every performance and find, even though I still try to do that. I got to do this quickly because, I have deadlines. Like feature films have deadlines, but they're generally not constant. Television is,
There's more time.
deadlines.
Yeah.
Yeah. But then something like The Porter, we treated it more like a feature film. So The Porter was 2 directors. Same with Cardinal, the 4th season, which was 1 director, a shot in 1 big block. And because it was 1 director, it felt still all the pressures of network television, but it just felt a little more unified vision. And same with The Porter, was not so unified, but it was very ambitious because it was director driven again. So Charles Officer and R.T. Thorne were very much driving it the way they would drive a feature film, because they both came from, well, RT came from music videos, but they both came from a feature film mentality when it came to that. So a little bit different than, say, Revival, which was block shot and, just kind of the story kept evolving in a way
Yes.
that was more to the genre, right? So just like everything, every episode, there was a new reveal.
Mhm.
Whereas The Porter was just more of a like follow the drama throughout, even though it kind of has the same sort of trappings of any television series where you want people to come back and watch. But it had a different kind of, because it was more character driven rather than story driven, it had that feel of a feature film. But it did not operate like a feature film in terms of deadlines and
Right.
outside pressure.
Right. All
Yeah, it was actually, that show was insane because they had to push a month because one of the actors would not be available, but they didn't push the post schedule.
the
So
deadlines. Oh,
yeah, yeah, it was because they had an air date, a set air date, and it was
Right.
so it was pretty insane in the end, but a pleasure
Yeah.
to work on and so rewarding, and everyone on the show was just so driven, but it was an intense
Mhm.
it was an intense schedule, but all schedules in the end are intense.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure you
So
guys
you've
feel the
talked.
pressure on set.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, I don't think like you, right? I mean,
Different kind of,
I think that's a
yeah.
different. Yes. I wanted to switch over. So you've talked about the pressures of like TV, film, like the difference of like feature films. But what about film festivals? Because a lot of your films have had a lot of success in film festivals. Does that require a sort of different take when you're editing?
When you're editing, it does. It's because generally those films are sort of these indie, they're not big features. I mean, Adulthood was a big feature, but it was very much made like an indie. So I think we're always definitely thinking about where it's going to end up. And generally speaking, with indie films, we know it's going to end up at a film festival. And I think it gives you a little more freedom. I think if any difference is
Mhm.
just a little more freedom, because you're not answering to a big studio. It doesn't have to make $800 million on opening weekend. It's not the kind of film like a Marvel film, I'm sure, goes through multiple focus screenings, multiple marketing meetings, because those movies need to make money. They're not out there for critical acclaim. They're out there for money making. So it's a very different kind of um, pressure. It's a very different kind of mandate, right? So when you are working on an indie film, you feel like you can just be you can allow yourself as an editor, as a director, as actors, everyone involved can allow themselves to be a little bit more willing to take risks, because this is going to a
Mhm.
festival or to an audience that knows that risks are being taken, that they want to see films
Mm,
where risks are being taken. You don't go to Sundance to watch a Marvel movie. You go to Sundance to
right.
watch, you know, a,
Yeah.
a, a film by a new director who is trying something
Mhm.
new, right? So
Right.
so I think that's the difference. So while there isn't like a mandate specific to a film festival, it's more just about knowing that this is something that you can take some time with, some play with, and figure out what it wants to be
Like a little
rather than
creative freedom.
a little
Mhm.
creative freedom. Yeah, for everyone. Yeah.
I'm so curious about the craft of editing. Like, I mean, as a primary editor, like, you obviously have to collaborate. So,
Mhm.
okay, so my question is, who is your closest collaborator? How do you work with them? And what's your North Star when you're in the booth? Is it using your skills to make the best piece of art, or is it reflecting the director's vision, even if it differs from your own? Like, what is your guiding light when you're beginning the editing process?
So it kind of morphs throughout, right? Like, I think the greatest thing about a director editor relationship is to not put too many restrictions on the edit. So if I'm working with a director who wants my take, that is
Mhm.
my preferred way to work, because it's like I'm still going to work towards the vision. I want the story to be told in a way that is, that's going to tell. I want to work in a way that the story is going to be told its best. So for me, story is probably the biggest, more so
Mhm.
even than the visuals. The visuals should support it and drive it
Right.
into a unique place. But for me, it's always about stories and emotional. It has to be, it doesn't have to be sad. I just mean emotionally gratifying or riveting in some way. You need to be able to
Hmm.
follow that emotion. But a director who allows you to have the freedom with your first cut, at least, to see the film from your point of view is probably the best thing that is for the whole show, not just for me, because they have an idea of what it's going to look like. The actors have an idea of what their performance is. The writers have an idea of how it's going to be expressed onto film, and it's never that, right? Like it's never that, because there's so many variables. Everyone is unique.
Yeah.
Everyone is bringing something
Right.
different, and so in the end, it's a combination of all those things, which is a beautiful thing. That's why filmmaking
Mhm.
is incredible. And I mean, and the DOP brings something that obviously the DOP and the director work super hand in hand. But at the end of the day, what they're both bringing to it are their own interpretation of what the scene is, their own point of view. And
Right.
that's what I do then. And that's what the actor brings,
Yes.
their own point of view. And everybody does. The set deck, the art director, production designer, like like it really is. And I mean, I'm sure others will beg to differ, but it's probably the perfect art in that way. Like it's just everybody. And then in the end, it's the sound and the music. Like it just brings so many crafts together in a way that
Yes.
creates this unique thing. Even if it's not perfect, it's unique and it's beautiful, and it's a combination of so many people's heart and soul. And as an editor, people don't realize in the film world, because nobody talks about the editing unless it's shitty, is that we're on from the get-go. Like we're
Yeah.
on from day one of shooting, sometimes earlier. We're in conversations with the directors. We're on from day one of shooting, and we're there until the bitter end. And
So
so like
right.
we are on for a long time. We're
While everybody else is like gone. Yeah, you're still there in the room
gone.
cutting.
Everybody's gone. Yeah.
Sandy, are you editing as soon as you get dailies? Like, is the process beginning even at that point? I didn't know that. That's
Yeah.
so interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
First day of shoot, the second day I have dailies. It's like we're always a day behind.
Yeah.
But we're getting dailies. The next day we're cutting, and it's assembly mode. So it's not fine,
rough-
but it's
Right.
we're
You're laying it out.
together. We're figuring it out. We're starting to think about music. We're starting to think about sound design. We're starting to think about the tone. Sometimes we're sending scenes to set because the director wants to make sure things are cutting together, in which case then we panic and make sure it's a little more polished. But, like just especially if it's like, I remember the first time I had to send something, I was like terrified I was going to get fired, because, that's always our fear in our business, right? Is like, we're going to get fired. But we're always, always, always editing from day one. And even before, like if I'm close enough, if I've had a collaboration with a director before, and I'm lucky to have relationship with a couple of directors, will send me the script ahead of time and ask for my feedback ahead of time. So, and so usually I keep it simple, like, make sure you have a little bit of this, a little bit of that. I don't want to get too involved with the script, because that's not my purview, but I really appreciate the feedback. And if it's something I can offer from an editorial standpoint, then I will. But yeah, we're always editing. And so if I'm lucky to have a great team, I will have an assistant editor who is good at keeping things organized, but also creative. So they can help me with sound effects, visual effects. If I'm lucky, I can bring on a trainee so we can keep somebody trained and get somebody interested in film. So that's my team. Usually, if I'm lucky, I have two assistants. If it's a small little indie piece, then I have at least one solid assistant that I can bring on board, who is more of a partner than an assistant, honestly. They're called assistants, but really they're like co-editors in so many ways. And so I guess, like you said, my shining light, my guiding light is story. And sometimes the story is not all that's in the script. Sometimes the actors bring more to it. Sometimes the director brings more to it. The music, the sound brings more to it. The edit can bring more to it. And we're always just cutting and cutting and cutting and just trying to figure out what is the best way to tell the story. And it starts with scene to scene, and then it starts with and then it moves into more of a flow and acts, and we start to figure out like the flow of the film, and then usually we have, if not a big formal screening like a big studio film would have, sometimes they have several, we would at least have one, trusted family and friends, people who have not read the script. Sometimes you bring in an outside team, but for an indie film, usually it's still a contained, very small process, but you get people to watch it and then you get feedback. But the most important feedback is sitting in that audience and feeling how the audience is feeling and understanding when they get bored, understanding when, because you've been in movies in screenings.
Yeah.
You're like, you just don't necessarily know why, but you feel, you got to go to the bathroom all of a sudden.
Restless.
You check
Yeah.
you check your watch, and you start to, and those are the cues that we look for when we're in a screening, and then we're like, oh, the energy so dipped there, and there were some scenes, there's always some scenes that come out. And it's not because they're bad scenes. It's not because performance was bad. It's not because they were shot poorly. It's because the scene in the script, it worked. It was beautifully shot. It was beautifully performed, but the whole film, the energy just went, and we know that we have to tighten that up and tighten it up. Yeah. This isn't the point of the film where we need that energy to go down. We need the energy to go. We never want the energy to go down, but if the energy is going to go down ever, we need it to be in a spot where it'll work. Not where it's going to be like, we're like panic, and then whoa. You need it to be sustained energy. It doesn't have to be sustained high energy, but it has to be sustained energy. And so that's generally the process. And then I'm there, we build a lot in the edit that is what we call temp, but essentially, temp music, temp sound effects, temp VFX. We just need to do enough to tell the story visually, audio, sound design, audibly, and musically. And then if the VFX are needed to tell the story, it's just so much easier to have somebody like like my assistant on Adulthood, but on several other pieces, Mary Jurek. She does everything. She's just like a one-stop shop. And she can do it all. And it's great because like if we're like, we can't just see this guy lying on the ground. It's not telling enough. Like we need to see the blood pooling out of his head. She'll do it. And then that'll just help the edit. And it'll also help me figure out, oh, let's hold on it a little longer. Let's really show that. Because without the blood, I might think, oh, this shot isn't doing much for us. So, so we work together to make sure that all happens. And then when I find out who the sound team is, hopefully it's early enough that we start to have conversations. If not super early, because they're also busy, sometimes I will ask for specific sounds and that'll get things going a little bit earlier. And then hopefully we also have a composer early enough that even if I'm using temp music, the composer can start seeing what we have. Some composers don't like to hear the music that we have. Some do. Just really depends. So they can get ideas or they want to be fresh. But either way, then we start getting sketches from them and start understanding how they're thinking through. And then that sometimes triggers you to go, oh, it would be interesting to try something a little bit more like this and see, because then maybe it's counterintuitive rather than supportive, it's clashing a little bit and giving us some. So everyone just brings their own sort of expertise, but also their own creativity and their own excitement even to a project that kind of just makes it a whole rather than just these individual parts, which it can feel like sometimes. A film can sometimes feel like scenes rather than, and you see it like in my process, you see where it's just a collection of scenes and then it starts to take shape and then it starts to really take form. And then all of a sudden it's there. And sometimes, and it's rarely ever perfect. I mean, let's be honest, it's never perfect, but we get it to the best that it can be, at least from all of our points of view.
Beautiful creative collaboration, right? It's an amalgamation of all these creative people coming together and piecing this thing together. It's incredible. Yeah.
Right. And so much tact must be there, like diplomacy you had touched upon earlier, of dealing with all of these people who are very firm, likely in their artistic vision and sort of, the back and forth of like, well, we couldn't quite do this, but maybe if we do this, or you know what, this might be better.
Yeah. There's a lot of tact, especially when
it's a skill.
It's a skill.
Yeah.
Especially when you get a lot of producers in the room, which feature films we don't have as much, but sometimes there's one creative producer who's very involved. And sometimes it can be a clash between director and producer vision because producers are thinking marketing, producers are thinking, sales, producers are thinking
a line,
in a slightly different way, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing either.
Yeah.
A lot of especially creative producers can bring a lot to the project. You're a little bit monkey in the middle in those positions, because in those situations, because if you disagree with something or you agree with something, sometimes they'll just be like, "What do you think?" And you're like, "I don't want to think. I don't want to. I don't." Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So sometimes you have to be like, "Well, that's a good point, and that's a good point, and why don't we try it and just see?" And because
Mm.
honestly, it's really hard to be in that position, and
Mhm.
but you also have to. One of the things that it's probably the hardest thing is to voice your own opinion, right? Is to voice your own thoughts. But that's what they want. They want you to be honest, but sometimes it's hard because you're like, well, it's good. This is great, but this could be better because I like that person's idea. But you don't want to hurt feelings, because I think
Right.
anything creative comes with so much weight that people
And so
do
much
get,
passion.
and so much passion. And some people are great. Some people are like, no, 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 just give it to me straight. And other people, you can tell they don't want you to give it to them straight, even if they say it. So you have to sort of
Even if they say it,
even if
give
they
it to
say
me
it. And
straight.
yeah, yeah, exactly. So there's
If it's
effort
positive.
involved. You have to be
Yeah.
a bit of a therapist sometimes. You got to be a bit of a mom sometimes. Like I sometimes laugh. I'm like, I get home, I have 2 kids, and I get home and I'm like, I've just been parenting all day. I can't parent my own children.
God.
I've been parenting a room full of directors and producers. Like, give me a minute. Oh my God,
Drained.
parenting. But like, I'm drained because it can feel that way, right? Because you're just like,
Yes.
it's a lot of egos, and a lot of
Mm.
really big feelings can go into it, especially when things get like, especially as things start getting near the end and people start feeling
Mhm.
like their control is or their grip on the control of the film is starting to ease up a little bit, because
Mm.
there's not as much to do. It's in a good place, or we're in a place where we need a little bit more input, or it can get hard on everyone, including me. I have an ego too, it can get a little bit testy in the room sometimes.
Yes.
But
Yes.
but
Yeah.
then it's important to, by then, have a relationship and be able to walk away and talk about all of you've achieved so far. Have a drink sometimes, a coffee, whatever you need to just sort of, and sometimes it's just having a conversation and having a good laugh. It's just
Yes.
being like, you know what, we're so close, or
Yes.
they had a good point. Let's think about these things. Let's not think of notes as, I mean, sometimes we look at notes and we're like, they don't know what they're talking about. And then we look at notes and we go, maybe they have a point, so there's always this push pull of like, I
Yeah.
know better. Maybe they have a valid point
Right.
here. So I think keeping an open mind is really
Yes.
important. It's difficult.
Yeah.
We're human at the end of the day. There's got to be some trust that we're all in it for the film or the show.
Mhm.
Ultimately, that's what's most important. So
Sandy, we are reaching our hour. This has been so fascinating. I feel like I'm learning so much about the editing process. So, a couple more questions before we let you go. You touched upon working, with junior editors or co-editors. You said, what advice would you give to editors out there who are maybe in their early stage of their career? They're working towards moving up or just making it in this industry, period. What advice do you have for your fellow artists out there?
it's a tough business. So it's hard. Like, it's not a one size fits all kind of a career. So no matter what part of this business you're in, I think the biggest thing is to just keep working at the craft. So whether it's, if you're in your early stages of your career, and I hate being that person that says, you've got to like put in your time. But it's not about putting in your time. You don't have to grab coffee forever. You don't have to, be a PA forever. And I don't mean it that way. I just mean that it takes time and practice and immersion to be at a point in your career where you're working on stuff you want to work on. We all kind of go through those growing pains of working as an assistant, of working on short films, of working on maybe, web series, reality TV, things that may not have been on your, wish list of things
Your
you're gonna
big vision. Yeah.
big vision board. We'll get there. It's a long road. I've been in this business since 2002. So what's that? 23 years? No, and I've only been editing since full time since 2017. So that was like many years of assisting and working my way up. And I didn't start at 20. My first job, my first real show that I got, like my first feature film as a second assistant, not as a trainee, I was already 30. So, you got to take those jobs because it's not even about paying your dues. It's about learning and growth. So if the way to get in is through an assistant role, if the way to get in is through a PA role, just get in. And then when you're ready to make that jump, just be prepared to come down a notch. Like you might be I always joke that I was at the top of my career as an assistant. I was like an assistant in demand.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't want to do that anymore. I want to edit. And then I took a huge hit. Didn't get hired for a long time, a financial hit. I was making less as an editor starting out again, because it does feel like you're starting out again than I was an assistant at the top of my career. But it's definitely not linear. It's definitely more of like a roller coaster. And I think what I would say is have patience, take any opportunity, be an opportunist, take any opportunity you can to cut, to assist, to co-edit, to, do anything you can to sort of break through and gain the experience. And also there are mentorships that you can apply for. There are like programs like the CFC. I would tell somebody, if that's a route. I know editors who just were scrappy and just took anything and everything they could and started from, they didn't assist, but they just made their way by starting with like, commercials, videos. There's so many pathways. It's hard to sort of give one type of singular advice, but what I would say mostly is just take the opportunities given, even if you think, oh, this isn't something I want to work on, just do it. And sometimes the worst things are the things you learn the most on, because something that's poorly shot, poorly performed, poorly written, you've got to make something out of that. And it falls on you. And you can do it. It's amazing what you can do. And it's not because the director didn't have a vision. The director maybe didn't have the resources, didn't have the money, didn't have the talent that they wanted because they didn't have the money. And so you can't just say, well, here, I'm going to slap this together. You're going to make the effort to make this thing something that's going to go to a festival. And you can do it because that's what we do, right? And I think having that attitude, taking advice, working under somebody if you can, who will take you under their wing and teach you. These are all amazing opportunities for anybody and not to be discounted. It's not unworthy to be an assistant. It's not unworthy to work on something that you think is maybe crappy. I hate using that word because we're all just working so hard. It's hard to call something crappy, but you might think it is and then realize, no, I can make this something good. I can turn this into something. And that's
something that you're proud of.
Something that you're proud of. Yeah. It may not be, a vision of like a Scorsese film, but it is somebody's vision and you're going to help them with that vision. And if you're lucky enough, that person is going to get an actual directing gig that's going to like bring you on as an editor, and then you can maybe go together. Like there are so many pathways, and mine is not the only one, but it came with a little patience, came with a little drive, and it came with a lot of passion. And, ultimately, I think that's what's the most important is what are you passionate about? You will just keep driving for it. And don't be afraid to reach out to people. I think, listen, editors are loners. We sit in our room all day and look at screens. You get an opportunity to talk to people. You're just like, blah, blah, blah. So, you call me up. I'll talk to you. I'll help you. Like I might not be able to give you a job, but I'll introduce you to people. And that's the other thing. It's just being
so
connected
nice
to the industry.
Yes.
Yeah.
I wanted to touch briefly because you did mention that you have children. How is it navigating this career that is, this crazy career with family life?
Impossible. Literally impossible. I have
Yet
no
you're
words.
doing it. Yeah.
I have no words of advice for that.
Yeah.
Honestly. It's been a challenge. I'll tell you, it's been a challenge. But the one thing I will say, well, I'm really lucky I have a partner who cooks and takes care of them and doesn't have as demanding a career. So he's home a lot more than I am. COVID, even though was awful, taught us that we can work from home. So that has helped as they've gotten because they're still in school. I mean, they're a little older now. I have a teenager and a tween, so it's not like the daycare struggle.
Yeah.
But and I was lucky when my kids were younger, my parents were still around to help out a little bit, and obviously daycare and all that stuff. It was messy, and it still is a little messy. My house is never tidy. I could never have anyone here to think that like I have some kind of perfect life, because that's definitely not true. I'm a bit of a mess, but we make it work somehow. I don't know how.
Yeah.
But
amazing.
It's I think every family is unique, and we figured out how it works here. And when it doesn't work, we shift gears. So that's basically it. I wish I had I wish I could write a book about like how to be a busy mom and a great mom. And no,
I think it's just nice to hear that everybody's just trying our best.
Yes.
And maybe sometimes we feel great about it, and sometimes, it's not so great. But we're all just out there making it work.
Yeah, it's hard some days. The late days can be very difficult. The one thing is, because we work contract, sometimes we do have some time off, and so it's important.
That's right.
Off.
Yes.
Breathe a little, hang out a little. If we can, once in a blue moon, take a little vacation just to sort of get away and reconnect as a family. It can be challenging, but it's they all know now, just because mom's home, mom's working, but it doesn't stop them from wanting rides to the mall or to school.
And being their Uber. Yeah.
I call myself Moober because it's just like,
Moober.
Moober.
I like that.
My husband's Moober Eats and I'm Moober. Yeah, it's the joke in the house. But, it's we have our jobs that we do at home, and the nice thing about being at home is that I am here. So if they do need something, they come, they talk to me for a minute, it's doable. It's not easy.
Yes.
Like anything else. Yeah.
Sandy, this has been great. We have the final question, I promise, and then we'll let you go. This is what we ask all of our guests on the show. When you hear the phrase hitting her mark, what does that mean for you? How do you define success in your life? It can be personally, professionally, or however you interpret it.
That's a good question. Hitting her mark. I mean, I feel like I'm always just hitting my stride. And every time I feel like I've hit my stride, it kind of shifts a little bit. So I think hitting her mark for me is hitting my mark in the moment, and because I think for me, the mark keeps shifting, and it's partially ambition and it's partially reality, all of that. But I think, so staying in a stride where that mark, I hit my mark. I'm proud of what I do. I'm proud of where I've come, how far I've come. But I like that mark to keep moving just a little bit, so I could just keep having something to look forward to and something to sort of grow towards. I like to keep learning. I like to keep trying new things. I don't want to get stuck. I still feel young enough that I can strive for more.
Yes.
To me, that's what it means to me. So it's a movable mark.
Great answer.
Great answer.
Yeah.
Yes.
You passed. You get an A.
Yes.
Woo! Validation. That's all we need.
Thank you so much for joining us, Sandy.
Thank you for inviting me.
We really enjoyed that talk, and I learned so much.
Yes.
I'm glad. I'm very happy.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to Hitting Her Mark. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. For more content and updates, follow us on Instagram at Hitting Her Mark.